All right, so we go from Brad Powers to Greg Peterson of VSIN and the Hoopin With Hoops podcast at @GUnit_81 on Twitter. Greg, how's it going today, man?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me, my friend.
Absolutely. Glad to get you back on the program here. We're going to talk some games in the ACC, MAAC, Conference USA, Sunbelt, and the Patriot League. We're going to go rapid fire with those here for this Wednesday slate. But before we get into that, you and I were having an interesting little discussion before we started recording here about some of the implications of these empty venues for the Big West Conference Tournament, as well as the MAAC Conference Tournament, and quite frankly, some of the regionals next week for March Madness could wind up being played in empty arenas as well. And all of us are sort of trying to figure out how to handle this. What's your take on the whole thing?
I think it could actually help to the over just because you have absolutely no noise whatsoever that's going to hamper these teams. I know that you're going to have a little bit of a different backdrop. I think that actually helps a little bit. And free throw shooting is huge too, because you need all the focus in the world when it comes to free throw shooting. There's no easier time to shoot free throws than when you're in an empty venue. So I actually am going to argue that this helps out a little bit more with overs than unders personally, because I know that I personally, whenever I played my best basketball, it's when I was just playing against some of my buddies in a scrimmage. Meanwhile, when I got out there on the middle school floor, because I wound up leaving college, or I wound up not playing any more basketball after the 8th grade because I retired due to a lack of talent. When I did my worst play, that would be whenever I was out there playing in actual games rather than when I was in closed-door scrimmages.
So the question is, do you feel like that's a contrarian point of view? I mean, I personally think the Big West and the MAAC totals are going to get hit down because these are games being played in very, very big, professional sports venues. I feel like those totals probably get bet down. So what are you going to do at the outset here? I mean, are you going to expect that you're on a contrarian side and wait for these totals to come down and then get them when they bottom out? Or do you think a lot of people will be along the same lines as you, thinking it helps the over, and you may hit some of these totals a little bit quicker?
Honestly, I think this is uncharted territory. This is one in which we're going to have to see what happens the first day, because I can't remember the last time we've seen just a college basketball game played in a completely empty venue in which you're supposed to have like 20,000 people. So it is a very interesting spot there. Though I will say this. How many people do the Big West typically draw? Because you were talking about that being a huge building. There just aren't a lot of people there in general to start with. And there are some of these teams and some of these conferences that they play before a very small crowd anyway. So I do think that it's going to be a little bit interesting. I think there might be a couple people that might be on the under, but it's just one of these things where we've never seen it before, so I don't even know what to expect.
Well, I guess we'll kind of see how this whole dynamic plays out here this week. And then, like I said, potentially in a much bigger deal next week. But we did have over 13,000 people last night for the opening two games at the ACC tournament in Greensboro, although maybe that was paid attendance more than anything. I guess we'll have to check and see what those games look like tonight. But a couple of games going off tonight. Games actually have already started while we're recording this here on Wednesday afternoon. Clemson and Miami already underway. But the two late games in the ACC tonight, Notre Dame and Boston College. These two teams did not play last night. Right now, you look out there in the marketplace, Notre Dame, 9.5-point favorite here against Boston College. What do you think about that one down in Greensboro?
I think that this is a little bit too overinflated, because keep in mind with Boston College, they are going to be without Nick Popovich in this game. But Nick Popovich, the last time these two teams played in what was a 1-point game, scored as many points as myself. So I do think that that's a little bit of an interesting parallel there with this Notre Dame team. You're going to have the best rebounder out there in John Mooney. He leads all Power 5 players with regards to rebounds per game. That would be 12.5 per contest. As we know, Notre Dame does a very good job of being able to take care of the ball. But with Boston College, towards the end of the year, they began to play a little bit of better basketball because they were dealing with so many injuries earlier in the year. I do think that is something that you do want to take note of. And this is a Notre Dame team that they just seem to play in a variety of different styles. They were really playing fast towards like late January, early February. They've downshifted a little bit ever since then. 73 points of fear in each of their last 4 games. So I think that there's a fighter's chance that Boston College is able to stay within single digits and keep this one close.
The other game in the ACC tournament tonight, North Carolina. And we knew that a lot was expected of North Carolina because, let's be honest, they were a 14 seed, and some places had them going off at 12-1 to win this conference tournament. So this is the last stand for the Tar Heels, who obviously did not have a very good season, did miss Cole Anthony while he was hurt. Tonight they take on Syracuse. So they go play that matchup zone after having all kinds of success offensively against Virginia Tech last night. Similar situation. The line opened 2.5. It's been bet up to 3. Seeing some 3.5s out there now as well. Does North Carolina have as much success tonight against Syracuse in advance?
I do think so, because you mentioned the fact that they're playing against the zone, but Syracuse hasn't had much success playing defense at all this year. Let's be honest here. I think that they have given up 69 points or more in pretty much 8 out of their last 9 games, so it has not went well for them there. And for UNC, they're finally starting to play some good basketball, at least 76 points in each of their last 5 games. With North Carolina, last time these two teams played, they hammered Syracuse. They were able to get to 90 points. I do think it's going to be a little bit tougher because you obviously are playing in a neutral court venue out there in Greensboro. But with that said, how about Garrison Brooks? 20-plus points in each out of North Carolina's last 7 games. I like what he's able to bring to the table. And with Syracuse, this is just a bunch that they don't necessarily have a lot of depth. They've really been having to go to a little bit more of a 6th-man rotation. You do have Barumba Sabiti. He's able to give you a couple rebounds, but I do think that North Carolina, once again, going to be able to get the job done here, though I will say I was getting a lot of questions with regards to North Carolina futures as well. If you really wanted value with regards to North Carolina, you don't take that futures number. What you do is what I would like to call just a money line parlay, a rolling parlay where you put one unit on the money line game one and you just keep rolling it over. And that way, if you wind up getting a matchup that you don't like with North Carolina or something like that, you're able to tap out, and let's face it, payout is going to be better anyway.
And again, I mean, if any of our listeners take anything away from these conference tournament shows we've been doing, it's the moneyline rollover. All of our guests have talked about it. We've talked about it a ton. That price is going to be better for you than the futures market in probably 90 to 95% of the cases. So if there's anything you take away heading into these remaining conference tournaments or next year's conference tournaments, make sure that it is that money line rollover. Greg, we transition over to the MAAC now, the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. New conference tournament venue for this one. It had been played in Albany. Now it moves to Atlantic City. 3 games last night, 3 games under the total, 3 games that didn't really scare the number at any point in time either. Tonight we've got Siena and Manhattan. Siena, the number 1 seed in this conference tournament. Manhattan went like an hour and a half without scoring last night and still won the game comfortably over Fairfield. But Siena's a 6.5-point favorite tonight.
Yeah, this is really interesting because it's not like Siena necessarily lit the world on fire with regards to their record. This is a bunch that they're obviously going to have the best player out there on the floor in Jalen Pickett. He's able to give this team a little bit under 15.5 points. Shoots nearly 40% from 3, 6 assists to 2 turnovers. But with Manhattan, the big key for them, being able to hold up on the glass. Sakai Kareem, Pauly Polcap, they give you a combined 12 rebounds per game. Last time these two teams played, Siena was able to take it to Manhattan. They were able to get a double-digit win. And Siena comes in strong, winners of each out of their last 9 games. But I do like the way that Manhattan has been able to play in general. The big key for Manhattan, free throw shooting, because they have been so poor at the line. But we saw it the first time these two teams played. Manhattan was able to get to 81 points in that game. They were able to overcome Siena shooting 12 of 22 from three-point range. Big key for Manhattan, just being able to hold up at the point of attack, maybe try to force a couple turnovers. I do think that Manhattan has a chance to be able to stay within this number.
Now, like I said, this is a new conference tournament venue. So does it help you to take the Manhattan side because they played a game, got a lay of the land, got to feel a little bit more comfortable out there? Or does that just not matter to you?
This is one in which it doesn't necessarily do a whole lot for me because either way it's going to be a neutral court. I think that this is a spot in which it's something where maybe Manhattan benefits a little bit more, not because of the venue, but just because they now have a game under their belt in general, because that typically can help out some of these teams in conference tournaments in general. And with Manhattan, they just play at a fast pace to begin with. So I do think that that's big as well.
All right, so the other game tonight in the MAAC, a little bit of a late tip-off here, Iona and St. Peter's. Iona's made this conference tournament final 7 years in a row, 8 of the last 9. Kind of a running joke out there going into this conference tournament that they would find a way to get into the title game here somehow, which would mean beating St. Peter's tonight. The Peacocks are a small favorite of 2.5, but they take on an Iona team that just has a reputation in this conference tournament.
Yeah, but keep in mind with Iona, the big thing with this year's team is just the coaching situation in general. With Tim Cluse dealing all of his health issues, that has certainly hampered this bunch. So you're just not getting the same Iona team that you have in the past. Meanwhile, St. Peter's, this is a bunch that they actually played against Iona just about a week or so ago. They were able to get that win by kind of 68-65. This is a St. Peter's team of which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They don't have a single guy that averages more than 9 points per game, but Casey Undefu, guy that is able to give you right around 2 blocks per game. Doug Egger shoots over 40% from 3. Hassan Drame, 5 rebounds per game. Matthew Lee is able to give you a couple of assists. List goes on and on. St. Peter's doesn't necessarily have that one-star player, but they just get contributions from a little bit of everyone. And then for Iona, last time these two teams played, they weren't able to really do a great job of being able to take care of the ball because in that game, you had 21 turnovers from Iona. This is a team that sometimes they go a little bit too fast for their own good, and then when they slow things down, they just appear to be out of their element. I contribute that a lot to coaching in general. I think that St. Peter's going to be able to take it to Iona once again on a tight line.
All right, so we go down to Conference USA here, and this is easily the weirdest of the conference tournaments. 2 games going on at the same time. As far as Eastern time start times go, 7 and 7:30, 9:30 and 10. This is a football practice facility. Games going on Court A and Court B at the same time. And as crazy as it is, the lines for tonight's game, Old Dominion -2.5 over FAU, FIU, Florida International -2 against Rice, UAB -2.5 against UTSA, Marshall -2.5 against UTEP. So all of these games virtually lined in the same range, the 2 games going on at the same time. I mean, is this one of the harder conference tournaments for you to handicap?
It would be, but at the same time, we've seen it time and time again from this conference. It's not like these teams are seeing this for the first time ever. And what I think is so fascinating is that you often have seen a lot of upsets in this conference tournament because we remember with Middle Tennessee, looked like they were going to be representing the Conference USA in the NCAA tournament a few years ago. They wind up losing because it was just a strange situation in general. I think that was back in the 2017-18 season in which they lost to Mississippi or Southern Miss as about a 10-point favorite. So I do think that this helps out the underdog a little bit just because there is a lot of chaos going around. But with that said, I do think that this is going to be a very interesting spot to say the least. And sometimes when you go a little bit more up-tempo, perhaps that maybe just takes a little bit more out of the other team in general as well, just because there is a whole lot going on. And when you add in there the element of being able to go very fast, it can leave the other team in a little bit of disarray.
So speaking of these 4 games, like I said, Florida Atlantic, Old Dominion, Rice, FIU, UTSA, UAB, UTEP, and Marshall. I know you play side and total on every game. You say that you don't necessarily like one game more than another, but is there kind of a game or 2 here in Conference USA tonight that, you've really had your eye on?
I have my eye on all 4. I wound up laying the points with Old Dominion, laid the points with Florida International, wound up taking UTSA on the money line. And I was looking at UTEP at first, but this is a UTEP team that it looks like about half their team is banged up right now. They're playing with a bunch of guys that they're not at 100%. They're going up against a Marshall team in which they do a great job of being able to pickpocket. So I wound up taking 3 of the 4 favorites in the spot. And with UTEP, you do certainly have Bryson Williams who does a good job. But with that said, when you're going up against a Marshall team that does one of the best jobs in the country of being able to generate turnovers with that short of a rotation right now, they've only been going about 7 deep, makes it really a horse apiece situation.
All right, so we go to the Sun Belt Conference here, where the quarterfinals remain on-campus sites. Beginning Saturday, the tournament shifts to New Orleans to play at the Smoothie King Center, which is where the New Orleans Pelicans play. But we're on campus sites tonight, and so far, 4 pretty competitive games here in this conference tournament. Louisiana beat Arkansas State by 7. Coastal Carolina with an upset over UT Arlington by a point. Georgia Southern beat Louisiana by a point. And then Appalachian State beating Coastal Carolina on Monday night. So we get 5-4, 6-3 in kind of a roundabout sort of way here, though. Georgia Southern on the road at Georgia State tonight. Georgia State laying 5. I happen to like Georgia State to win this conference tournament, actually. What do you think about their chances tonight?
I think that this is going to be an interesting spot because I wound up playing the points here with Georgia State. They are coming off a loss last time these two teams played. The big key for Georgia State is just being able to hold up on the glass. We saw them make the NCAA tournament last year. Obviously, they underwent a coaching change during the offseason last year, but with Georgia State, what you've got is a lot of veteran leadership in the backcourt, and that starts with Kane Williams, a guy that's able to give you right around 4.5 assists, 14.5 points per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table. And for Georgia Southern, with regards to three-point shooting, rate the percentage of your shots that you take from three. One of the lesser teams out there in college basketball, and this is a Georgia Southern team that they've been playing just a mismatch of different styles. They've been able to get to 75-plus in each of their last 4 games, but prior to that, they had been downshifting. I feel like Georgia State is actually going to be out for revenge in the spot, being that they are playing on their home campus. I think that that is big as well. And the big key for Georgia State is just being able to see a couple of those threes go into the basket, because this is a team that I feel like they're the most hot and cold out there in the Sun Belt. But I do like what they've done with bringing Corey Allen off the bench, and he's been able to give this team some solid production.
Texas State a 7-point favorite over Appalachian State here in the other quarterfinals matchup. And in fact, Texas State as a 3 seed was the conference tournament favorite here. So what do you think about the Bobcats laying a touchdown this evening?
I think that the Bobcats have a good chance to be able to win this game outright, no question. I felt like 7 was a little bit too high. At 5, I would have probably been in on the Bobcats. With Appalachian State, this is a team that actually is getting a little bit of something out of the backcourt. You got to like the fact that Justin Forrest has been able to give this team right in the neighborhood of about 17 or so points per game. But how about the way that Isaac Johnson has been performing down low? For the year, he gives the team a little bit over 7 rebounds. This is a Texas State team that they aren't going to be able to match up with that. You do have a guy in Isaiah Small that's able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game, but with Johnson as well, this is a guy that is coming off scoring at least 13 points in each of the team's last 4 games. He's had 10-plus rebounds in 3 out of those 4 as well. Has done a good job of being able to stay out of foul trouble. With him being able to control the paint in a game that I think is going to be slowed down because Texas State, they're one of the best teams with regards to defensive efficiency that you're going to find in a mid-major. I think that Appalachian State should be able to hold in this game.
One last thing I want to ask you about with regards to the Sun Belt here. The semifinals on Saturday. We don't know who Little Rock and South Alabama will be playing, but we do know that Little Rock and South Alabama will be coming off of an 11-day layoff. That's a long time not to play in college basketball, especially not around a holiday or anything like that. Does that worry you about Little Rock and South Alabama on Saturday?
It does a little bit, but the big thing is the total, because I still remember, I think it was 2 years ago, the Sun Belt Final was a game in which neither team got to 50 points. I think a big result of that is because you did have such a big layoff. You had a bunch of teams that they were not necessarily fresh. Keep in mind, the Sun Belt Tournament wound up starting last week for some of these teams as well. I mean, Appalachian State has already had a game under their belt along with Georgia Southern. So I think that just these long layoffs in general affect these teams. I think it affects them a little bit of both ways. Obviously, the longer layoff is going to give you a little bit more of a buffer period. But with that said, I do think that this is a spot in which both these teams are going to be affected quite a bit. And I think it does lend itself to a little bit more of an underfest.
All right, we had several teams punch their tickets to the NCAA tournament last night. One team will do it tonight. Outside of taking away, the bubble teams, but one team will win an auto bid tonight. That one coming from the Patriot League. Boston University takes on Colgate. This one on Colgate's campus in the championship game, and Colgate is a 7-point favorite tonight. Do they win the bid, and do they cover the number?
I think that Colgate should be able to win this game outright. I just can't wind up laying this many points. This is a Boston University team that they've got Walter White, no, not the guy from Breaking Bad, but rather someone that has been playing some of his best basketball of the year, at least 10 points, and now 8 out of the team's last 10 games. Max Mahoney, arguably one of the best low-post presence that you're going to find in college basketball with regards to the Patriot League. He's able to give the team 15.5 points, 7 rebounds. I like the way that he's able to hold up. Now with Boston University, you do have some free throw woes, but with Colgate, Ivan Ravacanusis just has not been shooting threes the way that he did last year. Last year, at right around 6'9", 6'10", shot over 40% from 3. This year, that has shrunk by over 10%. I do think that this is a spot in which Boston University, a team that has given up 71 points or fewer in all but one of their games ever since the beginning of February is going to slow this game down. They're going to keep themselves in it. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off outright because their free throw shooting is not necessarily the best, but I think that 7 is a little bit too rich for my blood here in what is going to be a game that decides who goes to the NCAA tournament.
Greg Peterson, who you can hear on VSIN and in the Hoopin With Hoops podcast. Greg, what's the best way for people to find everything that you do?
Right on Twitter, at @GU_D1. I post up the link to the podcast every day. And for the Hoopin With Hoops podcast, you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Just search Hoopin With Hoops, and Hoopin is spelled Hoopin, is up on all those platforms. Break down a side of total on every single college basketball game every single day.
Greg, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for helping me out with this Wednesday night card. We certainly appreciate your segments, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
There you go. There's Greg Peterson once again of VSIN and the Hoopin With Hoops podcast at @GUnit_81 on Twitter.